Welcome to Crosstalk. Do you have a child that you love very much? Well, today I want to give you a view of God so that you may feel so loved by Him that you may never again forget Him. Welcome to Crosstalk. I'm going to tell you the story of how God rescued His children today. From beginning to end is the whole plan of salvation. But I really want to explain it from a parent's point of view. You know, when I was a little girl, my dad was an administrator of the church in another country. And the country we were living at was not his country of origin. And so one day, he received a letter, an anonymous letter, that said that he had to leave the country. We were in very difficult political times at that time in South America where this was taking place. And they said, you know, you have to leave the country in 24 hours because you were not born here and so you should not be here, said the anonymous letter. And you know, many people get that type of letters and threats in administration every once in a while, except that this one had a threat attached to it that really shook my parents up. It was, they would kidnap me if you didn't do that. So the letter said, if you don't leave in 24 hours, we will kidnap your daughter. So they knew everything about me. They knew I was an only child. You know, and I remember my parents, the expression in their faces, you know, they trusted the Lord, they worked for the Lord, you know, but there's something that happens to you when somebody says, I'm going to kill your child or I'm going to take your child away. So they prayed and decided that they were going to stay, that this was not something that they should follow, these orders. But they gave me very specific instructions. And I still remember it because I was going to grammar school. And they said to me, you know, no one can pick you up. No one. Even if it's a friend or a relative or anybody. Only mom and dad can pick you up from school. Don't talk to strangers. If there's a car going by and they call you by your name and you think they know you, you can't talk to them because somebody wants to take you away from us. You know, this was a scary time, and obviously nothing happened because I'm here today, and this did not happen. This threat didn't come true. But you know, when I look at the plan of salvation, from Genesis to Revelation, from a parent's perspective, I understand something about God that for some reason I haven't heard much, about how desperate God is for His children, about what happened to His children, and how He said, you know what? I refuse to go through eternity without my children, no matter what the cost. So today I want to present to you that view of salvation from a parent's perspective, how God sees us. You know, I am so passionate about the topic for today that I actually wrote a whole book on it. And the book is called Surprised by Love. And it has actually, if we can get a close-up, it actually has a little child that is very scared. You can see it there. And you can see the hands of Jesus touching the child's head. And it's a Surprised by Love. And the subtitle is The Unexpected Rescue of God's Children. We're going to tell you more about the book in a commercial later on. But I just wanted you to know that the whole plan of salvation can in fact be seen through a parent's eye from Genesis to Revelation. So let's go to the book of Genesis where it all starts. The day that God decided to have children. See, I know that most of you have planned your children. Maybe some of you have not planned your children. But, you know, we can understand the day that God says, okay, it's time for us to have children. The way he does it is so amazing in the Bible. He creates the perfect home for his children before he creates the children. We get in Genesis 1, this whole earth being created with very specific things so that humankind could live in it. And very, very specific things like, the air we would breathe and the plants we would eat and all kinds of things. And every day when God is preparing, if you have a child, you know what it is like when you are preparing the home that your child will come to. And everything has details in it. And after every day, God says, it is good. It's good. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. It's good. So you have the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, and God says, it's good. But then the sixth day comes along. And this is when we get something in the creation account that we don't get for any other one, or for any other day, and for any other creature. We have this divine dialogue, God speaking among themselves. The Trinity speaking in verse 26. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image. See, so far, nothing was made in God's image. It was just the creation of God. God was a creator. He was creating out of nothing. It's very interesting because the verb in Hebrew is bara. And nobody can be the subject of bara except God, because God is the only one that creates from nothing. He can create anything. And he created this and he created that. But on the sixth day, God says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish and the sea, etc., etc. So he was going to share with his children the sovereignty, the rulership on this world. And you can almost feel God's excitement as he's expecting his children to come. Verse 27. God created mankind in his own image. I am in my mother's image. Later on, we get the same word when Adam, in Genesis 5, has a child in his image. Same word. It's like, you have a child in your image. And God says, okay, it's time to have children. He has children in his image. He creates them in his image. And it says here, God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created him. God blessed them, and God said, okay, be fruitful, multiply, and do all these things that you can read in Genesis 1. And it's very interesting because so far we have a second day, a third day, a fourth day. But the first time we have the definite article, the sixth day, is the day when the crown of creation happens. This is the day when children are made. God's children in his image. And I love the fact that God gives it another qualitative statement. It's not just good like all the other days. Oh no, Genesis 1 says, and it was very good. Yes, because planting a garden is good, and having a pet is good. Having children, well, it's very good. And so here we have God excited with his children. And if you have your Bible, let's open on chapter 2 now of Genesis. And he's going to create a nursery for them. Even though the whole world was done so that they would have a beautiful place, well, he creates a particular place in the world for them. We know it as the Garden of Eden. It says this, chapter 2, verse 8. The Lord God planted a garden towards the east in Eden. Eden in Ur, it means delight. So it was and the garden, the word garden in Greek, that the Old Testament was translated to Greek about 200 years before Christ. It's called the Septuagint. The Greek word for garden is paradeiso. That's where we get the word paradise. So this was truly, in all absolute sense of the word, the paradise of delight. This was the nursery of God's children, where he was going to place them there to live forever. They were supposed to be eternal because he was eternal and they were in his image. And so he creates them, and look, he puts all kinds of plants and things. You know how you hang up things from the ceiling of your child's room? And it's not just because they need it, it's so that they have delight in their eyes and, look at something. Well, it says here that he put trees, it says on verse 9, not only that were good for food, but that were pleasing to the eye. Because he wanted his children to say, oh, I love this place. This is my nursery. I like to be here. I want to be here forever. in the middle of the garden, he put the tree of life. They would take from this fruit to be reminded who they were and their connection to the life giver. They were eternal, like he was. But he also gave them this one option. You know, they were under the moral umbrella of God. They didn't need to ever leave. But so that they would know when they were in and when they were away from God, there was only one place, one exception, that if they ever decided they wanted to rebel against God, they could. God doesn't want robots. He wants people that choose. And they didn't know anything else than good. That's how they were created, perfect. It was like a heavenly place on earth. Now, I don't know if you have ever lost your child for 2 minutes. I hope you haven't. I've seen women and men in the mall when they lose their child for 2 minutes. I've seen them get so desperate when somebody seems to have taken them away. Well, unfortunately, the kidnapper came along. See, the Bible is the history of redemption. And so we only are in 2 chapters when we are already told why this whole Bible would need to be written, why the plan of salvation would be needed. It was because the kidnapper came along. Now, we're told it was a serpent, Genesis 3. And we don't really know who the serpent is until it's defined specifically in the book of Revelation. It says the serpent of old is the devil. And so here we have the serpent. And the serpent, see if you can imagine this dialogue. Let's see if we can get a close-up here. The kidnapper starts talking to the child. You know, imagine this. The kidnapper talking to the child. You know, I was told to not talk to anyone that would want to talk to me because we knew that somebody wanted to kidnap me. Well, here we have the kidnapper in the form of a serpent talking to the child of God. And so here, this dialogue starts. And it's one of the saddest dialogues in the Bible, probably the saddest. Because it's a moment in which the kidnapper starts using all the tactics that kidnappers use to take God's children away. First of all, he misquotes and exaggerates God's words. God had told his children that they could eat from any tree of the garden. There was only one as a boundary for them to know if they ever wanted to leave God's moral umbrella over them. God would decide for them to always give them good. But if they ever wanted to taste evil, they had that one tree. Everything else was fine. And the kidnapper exaggerated the words because that's how kidnappers work. This is how they get children to come in. They show them candy and they said, you know, I have something for you that your parents cannot give you. They said, you know what? Your parents are preventing you from something good. And that's what he said. He said to the woman, so, this would be a word that we would say today. Indeed, has God said, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden? It would sound something like, so really? God said that? And the little child, who was a beautiful woman, Eve, she says, you know, he didn't say that. He said we could eat of any tree. But of this one, we couldn't eat. And because if not, we'll die, because we will no longer have a connection with the life giver. And the devil said, you will not die. He started lying to God's child because that's what kidnappers do. You will not die. God knows, you know what he knows? He knows that the day you leave his umbrella, moral umbrella, you can choose for yourself what is good and evil. Don't you want to know what's good and evil? And Eve said, okay, maybe I do. And so she starts using the same tactics. And unfortunately, I wish we had 30 minutes just for this narrative. Because the serpent is talking to her in plural. You know, unfortunately, in English, it's you, but it's you both or all the whole race. She is talking as the representative of the race. And she says, well, maybe. She starts thinking about it. She says, well, we're not supposed to even touch this tree, which God had not said. But she starts using the same tactics, exaggeration, and all kinds of things that he's using. And she's in trouble because she's talking to kidnapper. And God has said, don't, be careful, like my parents said. But she did talk. And she said, you know what? Maybe we want to be independent. Maybe we don't want God's moral umbrella after all. What if we can know good and evil? What if my parents are really preventing me from seeing more and knowing more? It's like if I, as a little child, little children think they know better than their parents. Imagine if I said, you know what? I want to talk to anybody. And if somebody wants me in their car, I'll go. Because see, you're a child, you don't know. They are innocent. God has the most beautiful things for them. But they said, you know what? Thank you, but no thank you. We can handle this on our own from now on. God, thank you for creating us, but from now on, we're going to figure out by ourselves what's good and evil. And since that day, we're still trying to figure it out, because what happened was the whole human race decided that they were smart enough to know what was good and what was evil, that they would decide, not God. One of the saddest verses in all the Bible is the moment when the children of God leave paradise. At the end of chapter 3, it says that they were driven out of the garden. No longer could they stay in this nursery because they had the tree of life, the symbol that they were eternal, and they were no longer eternal. What would you do if you lost your child? What if you lost your child because your child decided to follow a kidnapper? Would you say, you know what? They deserve it. After all, I told them not to talk. Would you say, forget them? Would you say, well, I'll go home and make another one? What would you say? I know what would you say. What you would say, you would create big signs that say, missing, kidnap, I need my child. You will go around posting signs everywhere you can. You will say, you know what? I will not leave for the rest of my life. I will not live without them. And that's exactly what God said in Genesis 3:15. He looked at the kidnapper and gave the first covenant. And the covenant was given in the presence of Adam and Eve, but it was given to the serpent. I will crush your head, said God. I'm not staying without my children. I will come and rescue them. That's exactly what you would have done. And from there on, our closest of kin, because we were made in God's image, our goel, perhaps you remember this word in Hebrew we discussed in the past. The closest of kin was a relative in the Hebrew scriptures that could rescue the closest relative. And God calls himself our goel in the scriptures because he's our closest of kin because we were made in his image. So our closest of kin says, you know what? I will come. And I will pay that ransom so that the kidnapper will let you go. Because yes, you are mortals now because you followed the kidnapper. But this is not it. This is not where it ends. So God would have to not only post all kinds of signs saying, these are my children and they're missing. No, what he would do is give us covenants so that the missing children would see it all over and say, he's coming back. He's coming for us. He's going to pay the price. This is the covenant history. He tells it in presence of Adam, to Noah, to Abraham, to Moses, to David, that this was not the end. And he gives with each covenant a sign so the children can remember who God is and that he's coming for them, that he will pay for them. Well, of course, you know why Jesus had to die. He said it himself. He actually said, I will give my life as a ransom for many. Because actually these were the children of God that had been kidnapped by their own choice. Yes, kidnapped nevertheless. And God did exactly what you would have done. That's why I love the book of Revelation. See, the book of Revelation, which I know many times has been misused to scare people, is actually the view of the end of the plan. See? That's why the book starts in Revelation chapter 1 saying, I this is the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is the unveiling of Jesus Christ. So you can see really what he has done on the cross and how all his missing children actually were paid for, and that if they choose his ransom paid on their behalf, you can read it in Mark 10:45. I have come to give my life as a ransom for many, says Jesus. Well, it was paid for so that his children could be with him forever. And you know, these covenants that God makes throughout the Bible, reminding us that this is not the end, that he's not giving up on his children, have this covenantal phrase. It says, I will be their God, and they'll be my people. They're my people. They're my children. That's why I love when we get to the book of Revelation. When we get to the book of Revelation, we have all kinds of worship scenes. It's actually, it's a wonderful book of worship. Everybody's praising God because the Lamb came, paid the ransom so the children could be redeemed. It's a price he paid. I mean, one of my favorite verses, I mean, there's so many, is in chapter 5, where it says, worthy, verse 9, are you to take the book and to break its seals to show the future of what happened? For you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. Yes, because that was the ransom. That's why it's so beautiful how the reunion happens. And that's the title of our talk. Can you imagine having lost your child and for hundreds and thousands of years posting signs everywhere saying, my child is missing, but I paid the price. My child is coming home. Can you imagine? I hope you never lose your child. I remember Elizabeth Smart's case a few years ago. It really touched me because her name was Elizabeth, and my name is Elizabeth. And in her town, there were all kinds of signs that the businesses forgot to advertise their own products. They were just praying for Elizabeth to come home, and when she did come home, and they did find her, and they took her away from her kidnapper, all the signs said, Elizabeth, welcome home. You know, I have video clips from the news. I have all kinds of things because it really touched me. It really touched me because I imagine, I get tears in my eyes. I imagine as heaven is coming closer and God says, it's time to go get my children. I imagine signs as I'm getting to heaven saying, welcome home, Elizabeth. Welcome home. You know, I've been waiting for you all these hundreds of years, and I gave my life for you because you're my child in my image. And Elizabeth Smart's father was giving a testimony to the news and said, when we found her, I had her in my arms in the police car, and I called my wife, he says, and I said, you're not going to believe this. Elizabeth is safe, and she's here in my arms. You know? That's what the book of Revelation is all about. It says that after having paid the ransom, which he already did 2,000 years ago, God is now preparing for that reunion, when he will finally be with those children that he wanted so badly since Genesis, that he said, I'm not going throughout eternity without them. Absolutely not. And we're told many things in the book of Revelation. For example, the coming of Christ to take the children. And we are even told what he's wearing that day. Did you know that? Revelation chapter 19, verse 11. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. And look what he's wearing, verse 13. He's clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. We're told what he's wearing. He has a robe dipped in blood because that was a price. That was the ransom he paid for all his missing children. And chapter 21 of Revelation ends in the most beautiful way. When God recreates this earth. Because see, what happens is that the Goel, the closest of kin, could redeem not only the person, but also the land of the family if they gave it because they were slaves. And so God redeems our land too. So this earth becomes the new earth in chapter 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And then we're told that the cities descended, and the covenantal formula is there. He will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God will be with them. Finally, the reunion is like, the universe can't wait. And finally, you can hear this voice on verse 7. And it says, I will be his God, whoever stays faithful to the end. I will be his God, and he will be my son. Can you imagine the day that God actually says, okay, no more signs? You know, I have been showing signs all this time. It's time to break all the signs. It's time. It's time because hundreds of years are over. My children are not missing anymore. My children are back with me forever and ever and ever, never to depart again. What would you feel if your child had been kidnapped? What would you feel if you posted hundreds and thousands of signs? What would you feel, and how would you feel if you paid a great ransom, actually your own life, and finally the day comes when you get to destroy all the signs because your children are with you forever and ever and ever, never to part again? I am very sorry if somebody has given you a different view of God, of a stern God waiting to punish you for every little thing you think or do. God is a desperate father who lost his children to a kidnapper, who paid a great ransom, and who's coming back for us. That is the story of redemption from Genesis to Revelation. And remember how I told you about the book, Surprised by Love, the unexpected rescue of God's children? Well, it's unexpected only if you are not a parent. But if you are a parent, you fully understand how God could love us so much because we were created in his image that he would leave heaven and come to earth and give his life because he refused to go throughout eternity. Well, without you and without me. This is Crosstalk, where we talk about Christ and him crucified and how he surprised us by love.